S.S.S. Vayikra, Tafshin Pei Gimel. So this is the 1 week that we actually don't have another parsha or another title. Next week being Shabbos Agadol, the last couple of weeks, Parshas Para, Parshas HaChodesh. And here we are beginning a new Seder of the Torah, beginning S.S.S. Vayikra. We're under 2 weeks from Pesach, and hopefully when we get a little closer to Pesach, we haven't figured out our schedule exactly yet. But next week for Shabbos HaGadol, of course, we'll speak a little bit about Pesach. We even put in a little bit about Pesach into this week's shir. So we're getting you started to prepare for the Holy Yom Tov of Pesach. The Torah begins this week's parsha by Yikra el Moshe. Vayidaber Hashem Elov me'oil ma'yed le'mor. HaKadosh Baruch Hu spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu from the oil moed, saying, and what did Hashem say? Adam ki yakriv mikem. A person who comes and he's going to bring a korban. Now, you know, over the last few weeks, we've been reading about the construction of the Mishkan. And once the Mishkan was put up, once the Mishkan was put together, the first Devar Hashem that emanated from the Oil Moed was our Parsha. Last week, at the end of Parshiyos, by Akel Pikudei, we went through the whole thing and we said how the Mishkan was measured and built and put up and how it was used and where to put everything. And we said, Chazak, Chazak, Benis Chazek, the Mishkan was up. And then we come to this week's Parsha, the first Devar Hashem that comes out of the Oil Moed, tells us our Parsha of the Karbonos. And within the Parsha of the Karbonos, we have included in there many, many Yesodos of Avodas Hashem. Many people come and you learn the Seder Vayikra. You begin to learn the Parshiyos, Vayikra, Tzav, Shmini, and it's you might think that it's a little bit more dry than what we've had over the past half a year, over the past few months. But really, there are a lot of beautiful Yesodos, a lot of lessons of Avodas Hashem that are learned from the Seder Vayikra. And maybe it's possible, says the Nesivos Shalom, that the biggest lesson of the Karbonos is that the point of Karbonos needs to be, the point of the Karbonos is that a person should be bringing themselves closer to Hashem. That's what a Karban is all about. Chazal tell us in the Gemara, Masechta Menachos, Daf Kuf Yud Amud Aleph, that we know the Torah says by oilas behema, by a korban oila of a behema, the Torah says that this korban, an oila of a behema, was ishei reach nichoyach l'Hashem. That it was pleasant, kaviyachol, however we want to understand that when you brought a big behema, you brought a behema for a korban oila, which was completely brought to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It was ishei reach nichayach l'Hashem, very pleasant kaviyachol for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But if you take look a little bit further, you go a couple of psukim further, the Torah talks about a korban oila that's brought of a bird, an oil sa'oif, which obviously was a much smaller korban. And you'll notice over there that even when you bring a bird for a korban, the Torah says the same lashon, that it's ishei reach nichoyach l'Hashem. That also is very pleasant to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And just look a little bit further in the pasuk. The pasuk says the same by a korban oila, by a korban mincha. A korban mincha was obviously something that an ani brought, someone that was poor, someone that didn't have the money to bring an animal or even to bring a bird, and he's bringing a korban mincha. And the Torah says the same thing. Ishei reach nichoyach l'Hashem. That the behemoth and the oif, the animal and the bird and the korban mincha are all very, very pleasant to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What's the lesson? The lesson to be learned from here is that to Hashem it's all the same. Whatever you could afford, whatever you could bring, uvilvad sheyechavein es liboy lashamayim. As long as you have the right kavanah, as long as you are doing the most that you can do, the Torah is teaching us a lesson that Rachmana liba boy. To Hashem it doesn't matter how much it costs, whether it's expensive, whether you bring a behema, whether you bring an oif, whether you bring a korban mincha, as long as you are doing the best that you can do, as long as you are doing the best you can do, and you bring it with your heart, Hashem wants your heart. To Hashem, it's all the same. It's all Ishei Reach Nichoyach L'Hashem. Chazal also tell us in the Gemara Masechta Menachos Daf Kuf Daled Amud Beis that we see by a korban mincha. How do we learn this lesson that a korban mincha is also pleasant kaviyachol to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? By korban mincha, the Gemara tells us, the Torah says, "V'nefesh ki sakriv korban mincha," that by a korban mincha specifically, the Torah tells us it doesn't call it Adam, doesn't call it a person, doesn't call it Ish who brings a korban. By korban mincha it says v'nefesh ki sakriv. Why do we use a lashon of nefesh by a korban mincha? Because a person who brings a korban mincha is usually a poor person. That's what a poor person could afford: a little flour, a little oil. It's not, doesn't have the cost of a big behemoth. Who's bringing a korban mincha usually? It's a poor person. So the Gemara tells us, Omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Ma'aleh ani olav ki'ilu hikriv nafshi lefonai. A poor person is bringing what he could afford. He's bringing what he is able to bring. This korban mincha is the entire nefesh of this ani. He's giving it his all. And if you give it your all, HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks at it as if you brought the most expensive korban. And what a lesson that really is for every one of us. That every person has to know that you do not need to do what your neighbors are doing. You don't need to do what your friends are doing. You never need to do what other people are doing. You need to do the best of your capabilities. And if you do the best that you can, HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks at that like you brought the best in the world, like you brought everything. And to us, to Yidden, it's not how we measure what Hashem wants from you. We don't look at other people. We don't look at what's expensive. We don't look at what looks beautiful to the rest of the world. Never gauge your successes or what you may perceive to be as failures by what someone else does or says. You just have to do the best that you can do. Hashem wants you to do your best. It has nothing to do with anybody else. And only HaKadosh Baruch Hu really knows what's in your heart. To the lay person, to the average person on the street, they can't see, they don't know you, they don't know what's in your heart. They just see the external things. And what they put the stress on is not really what counts. And we can bring a little proof to what we're just saying of art that you're going to say, we're all going to say in the Haggadah. In less than 2 weeks, we're going to look at a pasuk. The pasuk says, "Vayotzienu Hashem miMitzrayim." HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us out of Mitzrayim. So Chazal tell us, what does it mean that Hashem took us out? Lo yedei malach. It wasn't done through an angel. It wasn't done through a malach. V'lo yedei saraf. Elo, we say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chvoidoi u'b'yatzmoi. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, He Himself took us out of Mitzrayim. So the question begs to be asked, First of all, why did Hashem have to do it that way? Hashem does many things through a malach. If you would have asked me, right, if you're in Mitzrayim for about 200 years and they're working you back-breaking labor, I don't think you would really be concerned with who is the one who takes you out of Mitzrayim. So why did Hashem actually have to do it that way, where Hashem, He Himself, Kaviyachol, came and took Klal Yisrael out of Mitzrayim? Why not just have a malach come and do the job? So the Pashut answer to that is really that Hashem was showing His great love for Klal Yisrael by doing it on His own. There's nothing like the boss. There's nothing like HaKadosh Baruch Hu alone saying, I'm not giving this to someone else to do. I'm going to do it on your own. And if you think about it, I want to tell you a little bit what was going on when Klal Yisrael went out of Mitzrayim. The Midas Hadin was saying at the time that both Klal Yisrael and the Mitzrayim were all worshiping Avodah Zarah in Mitzrayim. And Mitzrayim, as we know, was actually full of the Avodah Zarah of Klal Yisrael at the time. So really, why should the Mitzrayim, the Midas Hadin wanted to know, why should the Mitzrayim get punished and Klal Yisrael should have Geulas Mitzrayim? Why? They both were worshiping Avodah Zarah. And it's actually a very good question. Why does one deserve to get punished and one deserves to get out of Mitzrayim? So Zok the Nesivos Shalom that this is why the Geula could not be with Malachim. You know why it had to be Dafka through HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Because Malachim and even human beings just see the dry facts. They see what's in front of their eyes. They see what the person is doing. But only HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees right into your heart. Only HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows that when Klal Yisrael worshipped Avodah Zarah, they were really broken inside. It was hurting them so much that they followed the Yetzer Hara. It was hurting them so much that they could not just get rid of the Avodah Zarah and only serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But only HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew what was going on inside their heart. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows what we really want. Yet, there are many times, and at times, we cannot stand up to the Yetzer Hara, and we cannot stand up to the temptations. And if we cannot stand up to it, sometimes we fall. And if we fall, to the lay person, to the regular people on the street, you're only looking at the person's actions. You don't know the struggle that the person is having inside. And only HaKadosh Baruch Hu was able to see that. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees that about every single person at all times, the struggles that you have and what you're really going through. And this is really the lesson here of the Karbanos. That even if you bring a Karban Ani, even if you bring a Karban Mincha, HaKadosh Baruch Hu accepts it because HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows you. Hashem knows what's in your heart. Hashem knows what's really going on inside. And we can take that lesson of the Karbanos in this week's Parsha and understand that we're not in a race, we're not in a contest. You're not in a contest to try to outdo the people around you. You're not in a contest to try to be like anyone that you know, any one of your friends, any one of the people that live around you and are around you. You are only in a contest with yourself. Do the best that you can do. Do what you can do. And whatever it is that you bring to the table, HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks at it and says, this person is trying their best. This person is doing their best. The lesson of Adam ki yakriv mikem, the nefesh, a nefesh that brings the Karban Mincha. The lesson that we learn going into Pesach is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees us. He sees us for what we are and what's really going on in our hearts.